Now come the days of the king.
Hello everyone. We're just entering. You can see that. No. Don't you take my microphone, Henry Wu. Everyone, isn't it great to be here? And those of you who are here after no doubt a very hard night on the academics last night, well done for making it this early. It's great to see you. And I just want to congratulate the organisers for that fabulous video. That was just wonderful. Dare I say, we're not having the fake media here. My name's Sally Coburn. I'm a GP. I also work in the media and have for 25 years on telly and radio, and you're too young to know that I was Dr. Feelgood, but you may be not too old to know that I wrote for Girlfriend magazine. And that's just, the boys know about that. Hello, I'm looking for a succession plan, so let's talk. I'm very interested in trainee issues and those sort of things, and we have assembled a magnificent panel of people today to talk to you about diversity issues and leadership, and we do have a microphone there for questions, and if you wave your arms around and I see you, I will point to you and you can speak and ask a question. I also want to congratulate the Orthopaedic Association. Where's Mish? Where'd you go? Is she gone? Oh, hello Mish. I just want to say that in my year and the year above me were the first 2 women to ever become orthopaedic surgeons. So anyone from Monash here? We so rule. Sorry, so does everybody else. But that was a fantastic achievement. I'd now like to introduce the panel. We're going to be talking about leadership and diversity, and as I said, if you've got questions, do come up and please feel free to address the microphone, but wave at me. To my far right is Libby Lyons. Now, Libby is the Director of Workplace Gender Equality Agency. She was appointed by the Australian Governor-General, and previously, Libby was a top executive at BHP Billiton and the General Manager of External Relations at Atlas Iron. They sound like very blokey places to work, dare I say. She also held senior public affairs roles at CITIC, or CITIC, do we say CITIC? CITIC. Pacific Mining, Alcoa Australia and Western Power Corporation, and as the Executive Chairman of the Perth-based disability charity Calparin. Please welcome Libby. Next to Libby is Councillor Dai Lee, and Dai is a diversity advocate and political trailblazer. She came to Australia as a Vietnamese refugee, and she founded Dawn, an organisation that focuses on developing culturally diverse leadership. Before setting up her own social enterprise, Dai was an award-winning journalist, filmmaker and broadcaster on the ABC. She currently sits on the board of Multicultural New South Wales and formerly on the boards of Australia-Vietnam Young Leaders Dialogue and STARTS. I love acronyms. That starts with a double T. The New South Wales Service for the Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture and Trauma Survivors. Di stepped into the world of politics in 2008, standing as a candidate for the New South Wales state seat of Cabramatta, where she achieved historic results. Di is a breast cancer survivor and currently serves as a councillor on the Fairfield City Council, one of the most culturally diverse councils in Australia. In 2014, Di was named Westpac AFR Top 100 Influential Women in Australia. Please welcome Di. And to my right is my Twitter pal, Henry Wu. And if you've got Twitter, go on. We've already started tweeting, so go and retweet so we can get the what is it? Hashtag SID17 trending. Come on, we need to do that. Now, let me tell you about Henry. Henry and I have known each other for quite some time. Henry is a urological surgeon and he subspecialises in prostate surgery. He's the director of uro-oncology and professor of robotic cancer surgery at Lifehouse. He's also professor of surgery at the University of Sydney. He's been a pioneer in the development of minimally invasive therapies for benign prostate disease, and he's been a regular contributor at both national and interventional meetings. He's published extensively on major urological journals. He feels privileged to be part of the foundation staff of the new Sydney Adventist Hospital Clinical School from Sydney Medical School. Sydney Medical School? Hello! At the University of Sydney, which will play a pivotal role in teaching future doctors. And what isn't in his bio is why I know Henry, because Henry and I over the years have worked very hard to advocate for bullied trainees, and he has been an absolute stalwart of support for young trainees in urology. So that's how I know him. Hands together for Henry. And to my left is Michael Gorton AM, and Michael is an experienced, my God, that's an understatement. Michael Gorton is incredible, commercial lawyer. They should be the enemy, but this man is on our side. He's got to focus on the health sector. He's also, this is why you mean nice to Michael, he's the chair of the Australian Health Practitioners Regulation Agency, you know as AHPRA. He's worked for the Australian College of Emergency Medicine, Melbourne Health, and most recently for RACS. And I have to say, Michael has been instrumental in shifting RACS, the College of Surgeons, across the line into dealing with the issues that have faced that organisation for so many years. Without him, we wouldn't have had the movement that we've got. And so Michael is very interested in all of these things, but also Michael has been involved with the Human Rights Commission back, how long ago was that, Michael? 20 years ago. So the whole issue of diversity, we've all got various hats that we wear. Michael, can I say your presidency? Yes. Michael has just been named as the new chair of the Alfred Health. So any of you people from Melbourne who are going to Alfred Health, he's the chair. That's good. He's also an honorary, wait for this, because of his work on the sexual harassment at the College of Surgeons, he was given an honorary fellow of the Australian and New Zealand College of, the anaesthetists. But you're an honorary fellow, yeah. He's got more fellowships than any of us or any other doctors. So he's a fellow of the College of Surgeons, a fellow of the College of Anaesthetists. He serves on the board of the Ambulance Victoria, as well as being their chair of ministerial, a ministerial chair of Patient Safety Advisory Committee. So he's got a few hats to wear. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Michael. On a diversity issue, can I just pull myself up then? I said ladies and gentlemen, and I was recently pulled up by Sally Goldner. Sally is a fabulous woman in Victoria who was entered onto the honour roll for women last year, and she's a trans woman, and she came out and said, stop saying ladies and gentlemen, we don't all identify as either of those. She said, could you just say everyone? So, everyone. And finally, sitting to my left is a woman known well to you, I'm sure, is Elise Busson. Elise is the immediate past president of the Australian Medical Students Association, advocating, as you know, or maybe you don't know, it's time you did know what AMSA does, advocating to the federal government and national bodies, they don't just organise alcohol. As is seen from this convention, in fact, can I say all of us have commented, and you will find out as you advance in your years, this conference is so professionally run. I would say it's one of the best run conferences that I've ever been to, and that goes back since I got my lap of the map. I think you guys are wonderful. I left the medal at home, I'm sorry. Anyway, Elise used her platform to promote social responsibility of doctors and diversity in leadership. Elise is the United Nations Local Pathways Fellow for Sydney. She's advisor to the Medical Journal of Australia and the International Society for Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. She works in health advocacy for the Australian Medical Association. Her interests are women and children's health, health equality and healthy public policy. And she's still one of you. She hasn't finished her course yet, but wow, already this achievement, Elise. Please put your hands together for Elise. Look, on that notion, considering the diversity that we've just heard about, I'd just like to run through one of the points that was brought up there and start with you, Libby. What does a leader look like?
Well, just a note on what our agency does. So we collect data from every organisation in Australia in the private sector that has more than 100 employees. So the data we collect covers about 4 million working Australians, about 40% of the working population. So it's a pretty good measure of what's happening out there. And I can tell you that according to our data set, most leaders, particularly if they're CEOs, are men, because according to our statistics, only 16.3% of CEOs in Australia are women. And if we look a little bit, so that's 5 out of 6, but if we look a little bit further down the career ladder, women represent just over 37% of managers all up. So, by and large, men are managers. The other statistic which I find really disheartening actually, but we're working on it, is that only 6% of managers in Australia work part-time. Now, of all the part-time workers, 3/4 are women. So that tells me, and it tells us, that if you work part-time, you can't be a manager. And I say bollocks to that. That's ridiculous. It's not about the hours you work, it's about the outcomes. And that's what in Australia we have to start focusing on. We have to start moving away from this stereotypical idea that presenteeism equals productivity, because it doesn't. And moving towards, this is the job that I need done, these are the outcomes that I expect. If you can do that working 3 days a week in the office and 1 day at home, that's fine, and the 5th day you're with family, absolutely fine. I think it's about focusing on outcomes, it's about focusing on what needs to be done for you as a person to live a full life with family, friends, looking after your mental health, your physical health, because if we have employees that are able to do all of those things, guess what? They're far more productive and they're loyal and they enjoy coming and doing the work that you need.
Michael, can I come to you, because harking back to your human rights position, but also everything that infuses through the work that you've done, are we at risk of bleating on a little bit too much about women and losing men? How do we pull men along with us? I mean, there's men in the audience who are going, oh, God, another bloody Sheila Fest.
I think that it needs to be a joint pathway in the main. I think there are occasions when there need to be women-only sessions, because I think there's a lot of sharing to be done. But if we're going to change the world, as it were, then the whole world needs to be involved. So if diversity, whether it's cultural, gender, whatever, is only dealt with in a stream, then it's over there, it's not mainstream. So I think we need to make sure that these issues are part and parcel of every discussion, every program, project, whether it's government, private, whatever. It needs to be part and parcel of it all. Now that's hard, because the numbers of people who will be championing the cause will be smaller, and it's hard to get past the stereotypes and the hidden barriers that exist, particularly in the private sector. But it needs to be part of the general conversation, not a special conversation.
So it's normal talk.
Yep.
Di, I saw a picture in that was talking about people with multiple, I suppose, layers of problems with sort of not being a white Anglo-Saxon male. Sorry?
I was just going to pick up on what Michael was just talking about, having the conversation mainstreamed rather in just one stream. And Dawn, which is about developing culturally diverse leadership, is actually what we're trying to push for is about inclusion. And I think once, and as we saw in that clip, talking about changing the mindset, I thought, yes, that's what we're trying to do, is shift that mindset to think about leadership beyond, from my perspective, just gender, and actually including transgender, women, diversity, ability, etc. And it's going to be a very difficult conversation to have, because obviously, how do you, talk about leadership to that will kind of go across the board to everybody. And so, in people's mind, it's easier to deal with just women, or another group. Indigenous at the moment are the two that actually a lot of organisations focus on when we talk about leadership, by the way. And our organisation have been championing and advocating and actually talking to corporate as well as government agencies. They're now in 2017 are kind of getting on top of the issue of diversity in leadership beyond gender. But what does it look like? How it's going to how that's going to happen, they don't know yet, and is a conversation that we need to have. What I thought was, this morning talking with Victoria Cook as we were talking, how do you make that happen? And I think the system is so, it was set up by, obviously, years and years ago, whereby women weren't in the workforce. It was set up by men for men. Therefore, to change that system, can you change it, or do you do something outside to disrupt the system? Because, it's hard to change something internally.
Elise, I remember when I was youngish, and I was on my very first board, a board that Michael sits on now, which was the Ambulance Service of Victoria. It was my very first board. I had a small child who needed to go to before care. Before care didn't open till 8 o'clock. And I had to go across town to this particular board meeting. And what I remember was that they said, right, everyone, all the silverback men around the table, not that there's anything wrong with silverback men, I'm now one myself, except I'm not the man, but anyway. They said, okay, everyone happy, we'll continue the meetings at 7 o'clock on the first Monday of the month. I put my hand up and said, and I had no concept of what this meant, but I put my hand up and said, excuse me, I can't make it at 7 o'clock on a Monday morning because I have to drop my child to before care. And they all leant forward and looked at me, and then they leant back and they said, we're grandfathers, we get it. Yep, that's fine, what time would suit you? So you being an advocate, I suppose where I'm coming from is, are we afraid to speak up because of the consequences? You've obviously been speaking up for a long time. Should we be speaking up more?
I think it is very difficult to put the onus on the people who are already struggling or already oppressed or already having a difficult time to speak up for themselves, but there's enormous power in doing it. I've often found that when you talk to medical students, they feel pretty disempowered. In a clinical environment, we're pretty disempowered. We don't really make any decisions. We do a lot of following around and following orders. But I've found that when you go into organisations, whether it's something that's local to us like AMSA or your local MedSoc, whether it's further up in our career like the AMA, or whether it's with you wanting to influence your local or state or federal politics, you really underestimate your ability to do so until you try. And if you're able to stand up for just one little thing that works for you, like as Sally said, we just need a little bit of time to be able to drop my child off. If you're able to do that for a circumstance that's relevant to you, then you're helping a whole bunch of other people too. And I think that holds us back. We feel like, I don't want to advocate for, more women in leadership because I'm a woman. I feel like it's going to look a little bit self-centred. But if you take a broader view of it, you're going to be helping a huge amount of people around you. And the more that we see people who are in leadership showing a range of diversity, the more that you encourage people to come along. And that's something that I totally underestimated before I was president, the power of people seeing someone who was like them. And people would come up to me all the time who identify with, kind of some area of who I was, who would feel like now they can go and be this other fantastic thing that they wanted to be. So if you can stand up just a little bit for yourself, then you often find you have a ripple effect and you help a lot of other people along the way.
Picking up on your point about standing up for yourself, and you mentioned how hard it can be, and you feel disempowered if you're involved in that trail of destruction, shall we say. And I've had medical students come up to me and say, "Oh, but I'm just a medical student." I'm sorry, you are the next generation of the leaders in the health profession. Not only that, but can I just point out to you, and I'm sure you'd agree, AMSA has been instrumental in changing the way the AMA looks at things. And I use the example of abortion. AMSA took a very firm stance opposite to what the AMA did, and AMA looked at themselves and said, well, maybe you're right. And so, you know, you guys have the power. But, Henry, as we know through our experience with helping bullied trainees, it's all very well for me to say you got the power, but in the actual tin tacks of the hierarchy of medicine, people can come back and bite you on the bum. Now, what you and I did was help these people from here. Is it about getting mentors?
Yeah, look, mentorship I think is everything, but the problem is that it's not always that easy for students to connect with the right mentors. It's complicated because when you have a medical student, for example, who is struggling and they aren't able to connect to the appropriate person, they can actually feel quite isolated. Whereas sometimes it's just by pure luck that you've happened to be in the right tute group at the right time with the right person, and you're able to make a connection with a senior clinician who can actually provide you with that helpful advice. I'm not sure what the right answer is to this, because over the years there's been many attempts by both medical schools as well as the AMA to have these so-called student mentor schemes. They all sound very good, but at the end of the day they tend to fizzle out because not all students need mentors, and not all the mentors who have been identified to participate in those programs actually understood what their role was. Nor had the time to actually devote, their attention to medical students who really needed their assistance.
Can I add, in terms of mentorship, what we found is that in the space that we work, is that mentoring, you don't need to actually be mentored, say a clinician with another clinician, a person, is actually the collaboration of finding a mentor who actually might not be in the field of medicine, but who can actually give you a different perspective in terms of engaging with people or social interaction or confidence building is actually quite more productive than saying find somebody who's doing the same, have the same pathway as you. I think mentorship, and people are struggling to find how to make mentoring work, but I think that where it comes down is to actually perhaps engage with the people seeking mentorship, what it is that they really want, rather than becoming a doctor or whatever, but something else that probably is triggering them.
I take your point, and I think it's very important that people do look outside their little tiny sphere, because what about, hands up here if you're involved in any community groups, and it could be not necessarily charities, it could be that you're in a sporting group or a dance group or a choir or anything. Hands up if you're involved in something outside medicine. You guys are going to be successful. The majority of doctors who get into trouble are those who don't have any outside interest. And let's face it, the system funnels you into that. And one of the things that I most congratulate AMSA on is the setting up of the GP, get yourself a GP. Because at the worst case scenario, a GP, okay, we're still in the fold, but at least you can go and talk confidentially to them.
I just want more comment about the mentorship.
Jump in any time, panel.
When I talk about mentorship, it doesn't mean that it has to be that you find yourself one mentor. Often you can benefit from having a number of mentors who can be of assistance in a number of areas of your professional development. And in particular in the area of medicine, one of the reasons why Sally and I have been able to particularly help some troubled trainees is because we had an intricate knowledge of the complexities of, you could say, the politics and the barriers and the sort of glass ceilings of various sorts that can impede their progress.
And what we found was it's not just women, it's not just a particular cultural group, it could be anyone who seems a bit vulnerable. And Michael, this has been the problem in trying to bring this group of people in the medical profession who are used to being having handmaidens and the kings and the whatever, to realise that they can't pick on the vulnerable. That must have been like moving the mountain.
Well, it always is. I mean, these are decades of systems and processes and attitudes.
And boys' clubs.
And boys' clubs, but it's medicine is still an apprenticeship model. So the boys at the top choose the next generation of boys who choose the next generation of boys. The attitudes of 2 or 3 generations ago are the attitudes that the current generation will see. I mean, we know Paul Nacelle, Dr. Paul Nacelle in Melbourne, who said it was interesting, and he said this about 10 years ago, there was the new generation of medical students coming through. They were joining the training programs of the colleges with great ideas, very open, very aware of social issues. But the moment they became a fellow, they acted and looked like the fellows that they were with, including, he said, going back to the tweed jackets with the leather patches on the elbows.
There is
so
an orthopaedic surgeon who still does that.
Like them, they looked like them as well. But so the apprenticeship model, I think, is part of the barrier we have to sort of move beyond. And it was great to see the AOA moving away from just a training program of a number of years, doing the same thing with the same people, to actually measuring competence. What a great idea.
So, Libby, you know, here we are in sort of 1853 in medicine, and the corporate world has moved on. You're way ahead of us. What can we learn from the sorts of stuff that you do that we can template over medicine?
Look, I think there's a lot that you can learn from just looking at what different organisations are doing, and organisations are having to embrace different ways of working and different strategies, because if they don't, they're not remaining competitive. They need to stay ahead of the game if they want to get shareholder value, keep the best and brightest, and keep forging ahead as an organisation. I think one of the things, and it's been alluded to but not talked about, is of course discrimination and bias, whether it be conscious or unconscious bias. And having a bias, particularly an unconscious bias, doesn't make us bad, it makes us normal. But we need to be aware of the bias that we may have.
And would that be an example of, I believe that autistic children should be in separate classes?
Well,
is that an example of unconscious bias?
I'll
leave the politics out of it.
I might be lynched when I say this, but I'll tell you about my unconscious bias, because it's probably a good way to learn. So I recently, not that long ago, moved to Sydney, and I needed to find a GP. And I spoke to people in the area, neighbours and things, and they said that this particular medical practice was a good practice. And so I rang up to make an appointment, and I said, I'd like an appointment with a doctor, please, new to the area. Fine, not a problem. And they said, Dr. Mary Crowley would be available tomorrow. And I went, oh, you wouldn't have a male doctor, would you? So my default when it comes to doctors is male. Now, actually, when I stopped and I got off the phone, and I was appalled. I mean, I'm in this role and I have this unconscious bias that where my default is men for doctors. But I'm aware of it now.
But does it matter that you want to see a male doctor?
Well, no, it will matter. It would matter. It doesn't hurt me, right? It's not hurting me if I want a male or female doctor. But if I was sitting on the board of a hospital and had to employ doctors and had to interview them, I've got to leave that bias at the door.
Absolutely.
I have to leave that bias at the door. So recognising, knowing what your bias is so important in any job and anything that you do.
Can I add the cultural component?
Oh, yeah.
Interestingly, because I'm thinking to myself, well, actually, you know what? I default to a woman doctor, because as an Asian woman, I wouldn't go to a male doctor. So I would actually default to a female doctor.
I default to old men doctors. I want a doctor who's older than me because I probably taught them otherwise.
But going back to what Libby said, it's actually being conscious of your kind of the biases, and we all have biases, don't we?
Absolutely.
But I think in a world whereby everything is changing so rapidly, and globalization and technology is going to impact the medical world as much as any other sector. So, you know, and you're going to engage with leaders that are global. So I think this generation would probably be more aware and conscious of diversity in leadership more than, say, your generation, Michael, sorry to say, you know, but I'm just saying.
Hang
so
on.
there's a huge gap.
That's ageist.
But you're a woman though, Sally, so you're actually
I'm
more...
ageless.
I would agree, but what we find is that women are being educated at university more than men now.
We've got,
they come
have
out,
we got more female graduates than male graduates now?
Precisely, but they
can
come
I
out
just
of
add,
it, yeah.
but it's still only 5% surgeons are female? Hello?
Well, let me also tell you that female graduates come out and go into the workplace and experience a pay gap. There is a 6% pay gap for female graduates. How is that happening in 2017?
So
That's a nonsense.
Sorry?
It's a nonsense.
So, Elise, we've got fabulously empowered medical students who are out there to change the world, don't notice whether you're male, female, or from Upper Kumbukta West, don't care what your cultural background is. Then you get into the system and it all changes. As Michael said, you start to wear the fellowship robes all the time. This whole notion of do you think we take it on? How are you going to take this on into the next generation?
Yeah, it's so true. I found that last year, every time that I would work with a specialist doctor or anybody higher up than me, they'd say, it's so wonderful, you know, the enthusiasm of the young, but they'd always make a comment about how that'll fade soon, you know, get done what you can while you're young and idealistic because it'll go away. And you do see that all too often in the hospital, you know, you see the beat down registrars who are kind of just doing what they're told and don't really feel like they have any energy to do anything other than follow orders at that point in their life. It's really difficult actually to be expending extra energy, particularly while you're in training, in, you know, staying true to the ideals that you want to create in this wider, wonderful, idealistic world. That starts to feel just really, really difficult and really low priority compared to just getting through your training. But I've noticed that, as Sally mentioned, the people who can have this kind of side hustle, people who can have another priority that they really care about that means something to them, that really deeply drives them, people that have that running alongside their medical career, they have better resilience. They feel like they can get back up when they fall down in medical training. They're more able to balance their life with social, with studying a master's, with doing clinical work, even though it's counterintuitive because they should have less time, because they got a little bit of perspective. And I really encourage you, if you're somebody who is passionate about and interested in diversity and leadership and promoting the people around you, it's actually really easy to do and doesn't take a lot of investment. You don't need to be someone that wants to speak out and be speaking truth to power, and that doesn't have to be everybody. You don't need to be jeopardising your place in a training program, although we do need champions, you know, who will do that. But if you can just focus on the fact that when you have people around you who you spot a talent in, that you can encourage them and you can point out to them, I really feel like you could do this role. I really feel like you should apply for that, because I find again and again and again, when I recruit, or when I did recruit men in AMSA to some kind of executive role, something important, almost always their response would be, yeah, thank you, fantastic, I would love to do that. I think I could really grow from that. I think I could really contribute. And almost without fail, when I would recruit a young woman, the response would be, I don't want to let you down, I don't think I can do that, I don't know that I have the skills. And it really goes beyond gender, you know, it goes to elements of race, but it also goes to things like people who have a lower socioeconomic status in medicine, who often feel a little bit on the outer. It's something that I didn't recognise as being as much of a problem as it is until last year when students started talking to me. And I really gained an understanding of the power of tapping people on the shoulder, because that's the way that a lot of leadership positions happen actually. People are tapped on the shoulder and that becomes a negative part of the system, just like Sally said, you know, we tap, or no, just like you'd said, about, you know, each generation of men tapping the generation of men, but we can use that system for good. If you can go up to people and encourage them to capitalise on their strengths and just to take a risk, then often they'll do it. And there's been studies that have shown that if you give a man a position vacancy, they'll apply if they've got kind of like 1 or 2 of the 5 qualities listed as requirements for the job, and the women will wait till there's all of them, you know, before they'll give it even a shot. So your encouragement can make the difference between them staying pretty much where they are and stagnating, and them being the leaders that we're looking for.
We have a question here, but before you go, I just wanted to say that I think the people, and I'd like the panel to sort of tell me if they agree, and certainly if they don't, the people who I see as being successful generally have a life. So it's not just medicine or law or council work. They actually have other interests. And the reason why that allows them to be so robust is they don't have one single view of themselves and they're seen in various things. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. It's about that well-rounded life, and that's where leading organisations, for instance, have amazing flexible work policies in place, because they realise that taking, to be a great employee, to do a great job. Yes, most people want to take a role in family life, but they also might want to train for the triathlon or have a game of tennis on a Wednesday afternoon with their friends. And that's all part of your physical and mental health, which is so important to anything we do.
Can I answer to the cultural component? And I'm aware there are a couple of people waiting to ask questions there. So what we do at Dawn is we actually organise leadership conversations within corporations. So we go in there, we talk. And what we found is that a lot of people from culturally diverse background, they believe that if they work, from 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock at night, that they'll be recognised for the hard work that they do.
To overcome their
that's right. And they
thing.
don't actually make time to network and to socialise. And what I say to them is that that's the fault, because you will not be tapped on the shoulders for any promotion, because you're not networking, you're not getting to know, and you're not going outside of your bubble of just that particular area. So you actually have to go out and, do a trial, go for a run, a marathon, city to serve,
sing in a choir,
going to a network, being out there, because you're developing other soft skills that you will need to actually succeed in your career.
The other thing about advocacy is we talk a lot. Yeah. Henry, did you want to comment? Because this poor woman who's been standing here for ages.
Yeah, because, look, I feel a bit disappointed that I have to, in part, disagree about, in that...
You're a urologist, you can.
Yes, look, the problem is that the winds of change in the field of medicine are actually very slow to get diverse, in terms of achieving success. It's taken a long time to get diversity in people who are our medical students. Then, well after that, it took time to get diversity in those who are accepted into training programs, and the big advance in that was due to national state-based selection, rather than little committees in hospitals where there were no structured criteria by which people were selected in these programs. Now that's where it all stops. Now when we start getting into the situation, what happens to these newly minted specialists? Where do they go? Where do they get an appointment? We're still back to the tribal appointment process, where he's a good bloke. He played rugby, his dad was a gynaecologist, and that stuff, I'm afraid, still happens. It's still absolutely
ophthalmology,
rampant.
You have to be the son of the son of the son, don't you?
That's right. So therefore, if we define success as being somebody who's achieved an appointment so they can practice their craft, well then sadly, there's still not quite enough of that happening on the basis of merit and on people have a well-rounded
But you don't disagree with me at all, because all I'm saying is that while you're waiting on that trail to be tapped on the shoulder, you can be playing cricket, singing in a choir, network, meet other people, and get on a local community board. In part. Now, I do apologise. Your question.
That's all good. I'm just returning to what Lee said about speaking out jeopardising your career. We know there's been a lot of instances where people speaking out, especially about things like sexual harassment, and it has essentially ended their career to the point where you have senior surgeons coming out and saying, if you get sexually harassed, just go with it, give the consultant sexual favours. Do we need better protection for whistleblowers and for people who are advocating for diversity in order to make this happen?
Michael, I think you're probably well placed to answer that.
Absolutely. So the response by the college last year to the issues that I think shocked everyone, some of us weren't as surprised as others, but the program of action includes a range of things, not just the usual things that you'd expect, but including appropriate whistleblower policies within the college, within hospitals. Every hospital that signs up with the college must have their own whistleblower policy. We've rejigged assessment of trainees so that we have what we call a rapid assessment team. If you have an issue or you have an unsatisfactory term, you will automatically get a rapid review from independent people coming to check, which means the supervisor who marks you down has to mark you down knowing that they're going to have to defend their decision before an independent group. So we're trying to break down that power imbalance.
But the sexual harassment, Michael?
Sexual harassment is very
difficult. That's a workplace issue.
It is a workplace issue, and the problem for the medical colleges is they don't control the workplace. Hospitals control the workplace. So even in hospitals, the Royal Melbourne embarked on a major program that allows people to speak up quietly. So you can be a whistleblower who says, I experienced this, or I saw this. And the first step in the process is it's not a formal complaint. We don't launch an immediate investigation. We have a peer-to-peer coffee chat where it just says, this has been heard. You may not know how your behaviour is being perceived by others. We are just letting you know. If it persists, it will become a formal complaint. So a lot of the people who have that unconscious bias or are bullies but don't realise it is they don't realise it. They don't know their behaviour is seen that way. But the moment a peer says to them, look, Fred or whatever, this is the way you are being perceived, they say, am I? Really? Oh, that's terrible.
And they change?
So a lot of them will change. A lot of them, knowing that is the perception, will change. But they didn't know because they will say, no one's ever told me that.
I just have to be the bully here and say that we have very limited time left and there is another speaker after us. So we have two more questions. So if you want to add something to that, quickly.
I just want to add from a student perspective, because I get the feeling that, I think the young woman sat down now, but there you are. Being the sort of person that's asked this question, I assume you're also someone who wants to get involved and do something about it, and I don't want the feeling this panel for people to go away and think, well, wow, things are pretty bad. That's true, things are pretty bad and there are a lot of struggles, but there's also a lot you can do about it. The struggle that we have with students is they often fall in a bit of a loophole with hospital reporting, that they often have a reporting system that works for staff and works for volunteers, and we are neither. But we are in the hospital far more than any other kind of student scenario. If you're interested in doing something about it, get in touch with AMSA, get in touch with me. We can help you and educate you on how to get in touch with your local hospitals and talk to them about the issue. They're very receptive when you do. They're very much on board frequently with sorting this out. And so if you're interested in doing something about it, come to AMSA and...
There is one other way, and I've got and I'm coming to you, Libby, is tell your GP. We document it in our notes that you had this experience. If you really don't want to go anywhere, so that if it does come up, it's in your notes and we can use it. Or do what a young medical student did and texted me what was going on in a meeting about a particular tutor as it was happening, introducing new students to this particular hospital. And he said, you realise as students, you're the lowest rung of the ladder, you're going to be shat on from above, and not only that, but you're the handmaidens to the nurses, so I suggest you cook brownies and bring them in for the fat-ass bitches. She said, is this appropriate? And I said, no, send me an email with those words, I'll de-identify it and send it to the Dean. Within 24 hours, the university had dispatched someone up to that rural and regional hospital to have a chat with that particular doctor. They never knew where it came from because I was quite happy to put myself up. And there are ways. And again, as Michael said, the coffee chat. You may not want to be identified. Libby?
I think, and it's something that I talk to corporates about and anybody I get the opportunity, but it's also incumbent on all of us to challenge poor behaviour when we see it. Inappropriate and poor behaviour does not belong in any workplace. We must respect those that we work with, and if people do not do that, then we must all take it upon ourselves to challenge it. Now, I would say that in my case, it has hindered my progression at times, but I cannot walk past an injustice. I cannot walk past somebody being treated poorly, being spoken to inappropriately, and I will always call it. So,
although a surgeon in Melbourne did that the other day about smoking outside a public hospital, he died. He was king hit and he died. So we have to protect ourselves to a degree when calling these things out. We have 3 minutes and 2 questions. Go.
Hi, I'm Ned from Monash. In Victoria, where I live at the moment, the government has trialled removing identifying details like your name and other things from your job application to reduce the potential for unconscious bias affecting people at the CV to interview stage. Unfortunately, though, this hasn't extended to junior doctor jobs, where not only do health services keep that information on the CV, they also ask for a photo of their applicants.
Oh, what?
Does the panel think that this is an appropriate part of the selection process?
Michael.
And can employers be trusted with that information, or should it be
Michael from
removed?
APRA, Michael from RACS, Michael is a lawyer. Michael.
Two things. In Victoria, the Equal Opportunity Act says you cannot ask for that information as part of a job application. So it's actually a breach of the Equal Opportunity Act. So step one. The interesting thing is, though, only this week, research was released which said in the Commonwealth, where they had de-identified all applications. So the applications would be received, you would see the skills, the experience, the previous history of the applicant, you would not know their race or gender. That was designed to empower selection, particularly of women in these roles.
Or it could be if you're a particularly good-looking person, it could be that you look nice.
Well, what's actually happened is less women were selected.
When they took it away?
Oh,
Then the unconscious bias was to get women in.
Actually, in the ABS had a shortage of senior managers. They de-identified, they set a target at 50%, they de-identified it, they reached their target in 18 months by de-identifying.
Okay, I'm going to...
The Commonwealth research released this week, but so they're going back, which is weird.
There is someone behind you. Thank you very much. We have 1 minute.
So you mentioned that only about 5% of surgeons are women. How do you think we go about changing that? Is that an attitude change or more a change in the system?
Henry, you're there?
Yeah, look, it's certainly, it's one of those, it's that data which just doesn't make sense. And there's clearly an issue. Look, there has to be a greater acceptability of flexible training. I think that makes a big difference. And
We
the
have a
other thing,
biological clock and it goes bing,
That's
bing,
right.
bing, 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 at exactly the same time as you finish your training.
and the other problem is that women who enter into surgery have to see that they've got a viable future down the track. What really saddens me right now is not just with women, but with a lot of the surgical trainees. They exhaust a lot of time worrying about what their future is, because we're producing a lot more surgeons, but there's nowhere for them to go afterwards.
And flexible, I work 2 half days a week in general practice. The rest of the time I'm in media, I do other things. I love my diverse lifestyle. And medicine is a fantastic platform to have another life. And surgery is the last bastion to actually encourage it. You've got a skill set you have to keep, but you don't have to do it full time. So...
The college has a range of programs as a result of last year. It's terrible when you experience a major crisis, but sometimes you need a good crisis to get the changes that you need. And so training program working arrangements have already been changed. So policy has been changed to have more flexible training arrangements. There are greater encouragement for women. There are programs through the Women in Surgery area that are providing mentorship and
But this is not just
supervision.
women, Michael. Flexible training is good for everybody.
Absolutely, I agree. But it wasn't ever seen that way before.
No, but it is. Look, thank you very much for those comments. It was a very short space of time for all of us to get our bits across, because we've all got so many bits we want to get across, so to speak. I'm hearing the conventionitis, by the way. I'm hearing it out there. Do not pass it on. Keep it to yourself. Can I please get you to put your hands together for our fabulous panel who've given of themselves. And here's Tori. And sorry we're in overtime, boss.
No, that was awesome. I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of everyone for that wonderful panel. I think we've all got